Good evening. Breaking news tonight. On Christmas Day, the United States military launched airstrikes against ISIS targets in northwestern Nigeria, delivering on President Donald Trump's warnings about protecting persecuted Christians. Multiple terrorists were killed in what the Pentagon is calling precision strikes. The operation marks a significant escalation in U.S. military involvement in West Africa and raises critical questions about America's expanding counterterrorism footprint on the continent. Tonight, we'll take you inside the strike, examine what led to this moment, and explore what it means for both Nigeria and U.S. foreign policy going forward. Here's what we know. U.S. Africa Command, known as AFRICOM, conducted the strikes Thursday evening in Sokoto State, a region in Nigeria's northwest that borders Niger. According to AFRICOM's initial assessment, multiple ISIS terrorists were killed at ISIS camps in the area. The strikes were carried out in coordination with Nigerian authorities, though there's been some conflicting messaging about whether Nigeria requested the strikes or simply cooperated with them. President Trump announced the operation late Thursday on Truth Social, writing, "Tonight, at my direction as Commander-in-Chief, the United States launched a powerful and deadly strike against ISIS terrorist scum in northwest Nigeria." The president claimed the militants had been targeting and viciously killing, primarily innocent Christians, at levels not seen for many years, and even centuries. Trump added, "I have previously warned these terrorists that if they did not stop the slaughtering of Christians, there would be hell to pay, and tonight, there was." Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth confirmed the operation, stating on social media, "The president was clear last month. The killing of innocent Christians in Nigeria must end." He added ominously, "More to come." But here's where the story gets complicated. Nigerian officials are painting a very different picture of who's actually being targeted by terrorist groups in their country. Stay with us as we unpack the reality on the ground. Nigeria's foreign ministry confirmed early Friday that the two nations had engaged in structured security cooperation, leading to what they called precision hits on terrorist targets. Nigerian military officials said the strikes targeted foreign ISIS-linked elements. Major General Samaila Yuba, Nigeria's Director of Defense Information, emphasized that the operation received approval from federal authorities and was based on credible intelligence and careful operational planning. Daniel Bwala, a special advisor to Nigerian President Bola Tinubu, told international media, "The U.S. and Nigeria are on the same page in the fight against terrorism." But here's the critical detail. Nigeria is roughly evenly divided between Muslims and Christians, about 56% Muslim, 43% Christian. And according to crisis monitoring organizations, terrorist violence in Nigeria affects both communities. Between January 2020 and September 2025, more than 20,400 civilians were killed in attacks across Nigeria. Of those with confirmed religious targeting, 317 deaths were from attacks targeting Christians, while 417 were from attacks targeting Muslims. So why is President Trump framing this as protection of Christians specifically? That's the question many security analysts are asking tonight. To understand what just happened, we need to understand the complex security landscape in northern Nigeria. The region faces threats from multiple terrorist and insurgent groups. There's Boko Haram, the group that gained international attention in 2014 when it kidnapped more than 270 schoolgirls. There's also ISWAP, the Islamic State in West Africa province, a Boko Haram breakaway group. But security analysts believe the actual target of Thursday's strikes may have been a lesser-known group called Lakurawa. This organization has become increasingly deadly this year, particularly in northwestern states like Sokoto. They often target remote communities and security forces, hiding in forests between states. In January, Nigerian authorities declared Lakurawa a terrorist organization and banned its activities nationwide. Oluwole Oyuel, a Dhaka-based African security analyst, explains the complexity. The region where the strike has actually taken place is dominated by criminal bandits, who have been tormenting rural villages with some ISWAP presence in that region, but not really specifically in Sokoto. The violence in Nigeria isn't just about religion. It's about land, water, ethnicity, and economics. But understanding why President Trump is focused specifically on Christian persecution requires looking at the political dynamics back in Washington. We'll explore that angle when we come back. This strike didn't come out of nowhere. President Trump has been building toward this moment for months. Back in October, Trump began warning that Christianity faces an existential threat in Nigeria. He threatened military intervention over what he called Nigeria's failure to stop violence targeting Christian communities. In November, Trump ordered the Pentagon to prepare for possible military action against Nigeria, a remarkable threat against Africa's most populous nation and one of America's key partners on the continent. Trump also designated Nigeria a country of particular concern under the U.S. International Religious Freedom Act, suggesting his administration believes Nigeria has engaged in systematic violations of religious freedom. The pressure hasn't just come from the White House. Senator Ted Cruz and other Republicans in Congress have been calling for U.S. intervention, claiming Nigeria's government wasn't doing enough to prevent attacks on Christians. Just weeks ago, the Trump administration rolled out a new visa restriction policy targeting Nigerians accused of orchestrating religious violence against Christians. Nigerian officials have pushed back strongly against this characterization. They insist that armed groups target both Muslim and Christian communities, and that U.S. claims of Christian persecution oversimplify a complex security situation. So what do Thursday's strikes actually accomplish? The immediate impact: multiple ISIS terrorists killed at camps in Sokoto State. The Pentagon hasn't released specific casualty numbers, and we don't yet know if any civilians were harmed in the operation. But the strategic implications go far beyond this single strike. First, this represents a significant expansion of U.S. military operations in West Africa. According to reports, the U.S. had been conducting intelligence-gathering flights over large parts of Nigeria since late November, preparing for exactly this kind of operation. U.S. Africa Command is based in Stuttgart, Germany, and coordinates American military operations across the African continent. Until now, their primary focus in West Africa has been supporting regional partners rather than conducting direct strikes. Second, the operation reveals tensions in the U.S.-Nigeria relationship. Remember, there was conflicting messaging about whether Nigeria requested the strikes or simply coordinated with them. Nigerian Foreign Minister Yusuf Tuggar told reporters he had spoken with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio prior to the strike and that President Tinubu gave the go-ahead. But AFRICOM initially posted, then deleted, a message saying the strike was conducted at the request of Nigerian authorities. That's not just bureaucratic confusion. It's a window into the delicate dance between the U.S. and Nigeria over sovereignty, security cooperation, and who's really in charge. When we return, we'll look at the regional reactions and what this means for America's footprint in Africa. On the ground in Nigeria, reactions have been mixed. Nigerian President Tinubu had posted a Christmas message just hours before the strikes, writing, "I stand committed to doing everything within my power to enshrine religious freedom in Nigeria and to protect Christians, Muslims, and all Nigerians from violence." After the strikes, Tinubu hasn't yet issued a public statement, a notable silence that suggests possible discomfort with how the operation has been framed. Security analyst OUL warns that Trump's framing of the issue could have dangerous domestic consequences in Nigeria. In a country that is largely divided, not only politically, but in terms of religion, these are serious connotations. It goes a long way to actually open the fault lines of division that already exist in the country. The diplomatic implications are significant too. Nigeria is Africa's largest economy and most populous nation, with over 220 million people. It's a key U.S. partner on issues ranging from counterterrorism to trade. But Trump's rhetoric about going into Nigeria guns a-blazing has raised alarm bells about American unilateralism and disregard for Nigerian sovereignty. Some Nigerian officials are already questioning whether this signals a new, longer-term U.S. military role in their country, and whether Nigeria is strong enough to exert any real influence over U.S. military operations on its soil. Let's examine the military and strategic dimensions of this operation. From a tactical standpoint, the strikes appear to have been carefully planned. Intelligence-gathering flights over Nigeria since late November provided targeting information. The operation was executed on Christmas Day, likely chosen for both symbolic impact and operational surprise. General Dagvin Anderson, commander of U.S. Africa Command, stated, "Lethal strikes against ISIS demonstrate the strength of our military and our commitment to eliminating terrorist threats against Americans at home and abroad." But here's the strategic question: will this actually reduce terrorism in Nigeria? Security experts are skeptical. The violence in northern Nigeria stems from multiple interconnected factors: poverty, governance failures, climate change affecting farmland and water resources, ethnic tensions between farming and herding communities, and yes, extremist ideology. Killing ISIS fighters at camps addresses the symptom, not the disease. Without sustained development, improved governance, and conflict resolution between communities, new fighters will simply take the place of those killed. Moreover, the focus on ISIS may miss the actual threat. Remember, analysts believe the group Lakurawa, not traditional ISIS, is the primary concern in Sokoto State where the strikes occurred. There's also the question of precedent. Trump has now ordered strikes in Nigeria, Yemen, Syria, and previously threatened action against Iran and Venezuela. He came into office promising to limit U.S. military intervention abroad, yet we're seeing an expansion of American military operations. Senator Tom Cotton praised the strikes, saying, "I commend President Trump and our brave troops for these strikes against bloodthirsty ISIS savages." Defense Secretary Hegseth warned, "More to come." That raises the question, is this a one-time operation, or the beginning of sustained U.S. military involvement in Nigeria? So where do we go from here? In the immediate term, U.S. officials say they'll continue assessing the results of Thursday's operation. Defense Secretary Hegseth's warning of more to come suggests additional strikes are possible if violence continues. The Nigerian government will need to walk a careful line, cooperating with the U.S. on counterterrorism while asserting its sovereignty and pushing back against narratives that oversimplify the country's security challenges. For the people of northern Nigeria, both Muslim and Christian, the question is whether this intervention will actually make them safer, or simply add another layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. And for the United States, Thursday's strikes represent a test of the Trump administration's counterterrorism strategy in Africa. Will precision strikes against ISIS camps degrade terrorist networks? Or will they simply push extremists into new areas while potentially inflaming anti-American sentiment? The broader implications for U.S.-Africa relations are also significant. Other African nations will be watching to see how Nigeria navigates this relationship, and whether American military intervention comes with strings attached to sovereignty. U.S. Africa Command says its goal is to protect Americans and disrupt violent extremist organizations wherever they are. But as we've seen throughout the war on terror, achieving that goal through military force alone has proven elusive. Tonight's strikes in Nigeria remind us that the global fight against terrorism continues, and that the geography of America's counterterrorism operations keeps expanding. They also remind us that these issues are never as simple as they seem. The violence in Nigeria isn't just about religion. It's about resources, governance, climate, ethnicity, and the complex legacies of colonialism and underdevelopment. President Trump has framed this as protecting persecuted Christians. Nigerian officials say it's about fighting terrorism that affects all their citizens, regardless of faith. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in the nuance. What's certain is this: as long as the root causes of violence in northern Nigeria remain unaddressed, military strikes, no matter how precise, will only be part of the answer. We'll continue following this story as more details emerge about Thursday's operation and what comes next. Thank you for watching.